Hi, hello, and good afternoon, and welcome to everybody to another exciting session, in this TestMu escapade that's going on for the last 2 days. So this is day number 2. And today, here I am Larry Goddard. I am a test automation architect. I am also the creator of 𝐂𝐤𝐸. I'm also a speaker and a good mentor to some of the good folks around in this community, which I've been jumping around and playing in for the last 20 years. Also, I'm not going to give away anything on my age, so I'll just say 20 years or so. And today we have, in this session, we have we have this nice session on testing beyond the surface, the advanced strategies for REST API testing. That'll be given by the esteemed Julio de Lima. And Julio serves as a principal QA engineer for Capco. He plays a pivotal role in shaping the robust and sustainable test strategies for final institutions. With over 13 years experience, Julio, you're doing well. Right, look at 13 years, look good on you. He uses coding and his architectural skills to contribute to software quality, at all the system layers. Julio has contributed to software testing community and has trained 9,000 plus students through his online training in Portuguese. Yeah, my hat's off to you, Julio, my imaginary hat to you. In this engaging talk, Julio will take us on a journey beyond the ordinary, delving into advanced REST API testing strategies from contract testing to security testing. He'll also unpack some critical aspects that often go unnoticed. You will gain insight into topics like backward compatibility, adhering to the REST architectural style, token structure validation, and even stimulating external services. So, without further ado, let's join hands with him to master the tools, tips, and techniques that will evaluate your REST API testing game and explore the hidden layers of complex software components. And after such a mouthful, here you go, Julio.
Thank you so much, Larry. It's a pleasure to be here today. I would like to say thank you for Lambda Test to allows me to be here today talking to this audience. It's a really pleasure, and thank you for the introduction. You have my hat as well. Great, that's great. So. Hi, everyone, again, and thank you for joining us today in this session. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you guys can extract a little bit more of insights or some thoughts related to REST API testing. And yeah, I will share my screen so I will be able to show you what is going on here, what I prepared for today. Okay, good. So now I hope you are seeing my screen. And Larry, if you see anything that I'm missing here, please go in out and let me know, please. Okay.
Yeah, not a problem.
Perfect. Okay. So today we are going to talk about testing beyond the surface. And what I brought to you today is that some of the strategies that I've been using in the projects that I work for, and also some of the strategies that I heard and I studied and I found useful to bring to you today. Because every time that we talk about REST API testing, I feel like we are not going deep inside everything that you can do as a tester when testing a REST API. And that's why I brought this presentation to you today. In Brazil, if you want to say hello to someone, you need to say olá. So if you can try in your house, maybe you can do it. So let's try it with me. Olá. Olá means hello in Portuguese. And I was born in Brazil, and in 2021, after working a lot in the software testing area in Brazil, I moved to the USA with my family, and I've been working at Capco US. So since then, At Capco, we have.
Hey Julio, sorry to interrupt you, but we are not able to see your presentation. Can you? It's shared on the wrong side.
Okay, let's see what is going on here. We will stop sharing. They will share again. Share screen. The entire screen. And probably now you are seeing, right?
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So as I said, I've been working for Capco, and at Capco we help financial companies to delivery or to have solutions related to technology development, software testing, and also business consulting. But I will not spend a lot because Larry did a good introduction about myself. So afterwards, if you want to talk to me, you can reach out through email, julio.lima@capco.com. So talking about REST APIs in a nutshell, REST APIs are basically a way to communicate to the external world, to connect our backend services, repositories, clients, SQL, NoSQL, queue, everything that we have on the backend is can be exposed through a REST API. And REST API is a style of architecture, right? So in this picture, you can see that we have the whole backend, and then we have an API that is, in this case, is a REST API, being the interface with other APIs, desktop, web, or mobile applications that want to connect to some part of our backend. And when I say some part, is that because the developer can select what they want to expose to the external world, right? So it's not everything. It's just what we want to expose to the external world. And we can do it through a REST API by saying, hey, I will create here some operations. And by operation, I mean, it's a endpoint with a resource, with a method, right? And based on your credentials, you will be able to use that operation or not, okay? So talking in a nutshell is this. And today we are going to focus only on the REST API, okay? This is also a picture that can show us that we have many things to test, right? We can test the API alone, we can test the desktop application alone, we can test the web, the mobile application alone, and then we can connect everything to test against the API, for example, right? We can test only the services, only the repositories, and so on. Okay, this is just to show you that we are going to focus on the API, but there's a huge world that you can, create test strategies and test itself. Well, when we are talking about the basics on how to test an API, we have tests like testing the input data that we have in a request. We can test the business rules. We can test the compliance with JSON schema. Much people confuse this with contract tests. They are different things, right? When we are testing the compliance with the JSON schema, we are verifying if the JSON schema that we have on the responses are matching to the Swagger, for example, or the documentation that we have, right? However, it's only one part of contract tests. Okay, but when we are testing the basics, we are evaluating the compliance with the JSON schema. We also do some non-functional requirements testing, right? And for sure, authentication and authorization. And when we want to do these basics on API testing, generally we use a tool like Postman. So we look at the Swagger, we see the parameters that we have, for example, authorization, ID. Then we come back to Postman and we go to create a new request. We put the headers the tokens that we need to use. Then we evaluate the Swagger to see what is the structure of the response that we want to receive, the types, the format, right? And then when we send the request, we go to the response, and then we start to check. We see the body that comes, and then we compare that with the Swagger. This is what we call Swagger, the compliance with Swagger, right? With the JSON schema. Then we can test things that are not allowed. For example, to not send a header will return a 401. That means you don't have, you are not authenticated, right? And then we can, for example, change the token. And then when we send the token, this token should be okay. But if we change the user itself, maybe we cannot have access to that resource. For example, returning a 403, right? Saying, hey, you don't have authorization to access this resource. These are some of the tests that we do when we are, people say, manually testing, right? This. In Postman or tools that are similar, like Insomnia, you also can create some automatically checks, right? To create some checks that will check if the response has the data or the information that you are expecting. You can test. You can check if you have a status code expected, if you have a response time that is good enough, if you have the data that you are expecting. You can check also how the response is structured, the JSON schema, right? So these things that I just showed here in this quick presentation, this quick demo, are what I call basics on REST API testing. And then at this moment, the idea is that probably you will be in your house asking, whatever I can do, because for many of the people that I met so far, they only test REST APIs using Postman. And all this demo that you just saw are the things that they are currently doing. However, as I said, you can do more. And some of the additional approaches that you can take when you are testing REST APIs are this: to test the API architecture compliance to REST, which means you will open the controller. Okay, I showed this to you before. Here you have the services, the repositories, the clients, and you have the controller as well. The controller is generally a class where you will put all the operations, the methods, and then we'll call some methods that will be probably services, and the services will call the repositories or the clients and things like that, right? But the controller is where developers put all the endpoints and the operations that will exist inside the API, right? So I can check these controllers and see if the developer is following all the REST style of architecture, right? So, for example, get, the method get is is supposed to not change anything in the server, right? So it's a safe method. So if I look at the controller and I see a get changing something or creating something in the server, I can raise my hand and say, hey, we have an issue related to the API architecture and compliance to REST. API testing heuristics. I can also apply testing heuristics to do some exploratory testing in my APIs. I can use test heuristics like Vader, Poised, 𝐻𝐸/MED. So there are many API testing heuristics. Or I can do also backwards compatibility. And backwards compatibility is a very efficient tool to help us to identify if changes in the API will hurt the UIs or the other applications that are calling my APIs, right? So here I have an example. I have a Swagger, and this Swagger has an operation post travels, post v1/travels. But the second version of this Swagger doesn't have this operation. So the first version has, the second version hasn't. So think for a moment in the UI that are calling this operation. It will not exist anymore. So how can I evaluate this and avoid this kind of issues? I can install a library called Swagger diff. So you need to have Node, and then you do npm install -g Swagger diff, and then it will install Swagger diff. That is it's a application, okay, that you can point it out 2 versions of the same Swagger. So here we have the v2 and the v3, okay. So how will you use this this application, Swagger diff? You basically need the path to the Swagger in the old version. So you do swagger.diff space, then you point out the version, the old version, okay? So in this case, I will put the version 2 because I have the version 2 and the version 3, okay? And then I will type a space and will put the version 3, okay? And then when I do it, I will see this kind of message here. Look at this. Swagger diff told me that there is a warning. One method was deleted. So as you can see here, the method post v1/travels was deleted. So this is a warning and something that I, as a QA, need to raise, because probably we have many applications that were relying on this method, but this method will not exist anymore in the next version that we deploy. So it's a defect. All the applications that used to call this post of /v1/travels will not work anymore. Okay, so this is a backward compatibility issue that I can raise. But if you are only doing this by using your eyes, maybe you will fail, right? That's still why you need to use a tool like this, okay? But when we talk about REST API testing, even these 3 approaches here that I brought to you today are not enough, okay? Because we have many other things to be evaluated. So today I brought to you some of few other approaches that you can use to go beyond the surface, okay? So we have the JSON, the JWT token, internal data and structure validation. We can check logs. We can check the functional code. We can do functional code review. We can simulate exceptions cases for integration. We can use AI to do test design. We can do REST API test coverage. We can validate the schema of the JSON, and we also can do contract tests. So let's go a little bit on each of these approaches. I also brought a small video to show you guys how everything works on these 8 approaches that I'm bringing to you today. So the first one is how to evaluate the structure, the internal structure of a JWT token, okay? So a JWT token is pretty, how do I say, well-known, because so basically all the APIs that I tested so far use JWT. And this is the token, and it's a alphanumeric token where you can use to identify yourself when doing a request for an API, right? So many people use a token, but definitively a low amount of people evaluate if the token, if the internal structure of the token are good enough, was created in the proper manner, right? So let me stop talking and describe how to do it in an easy way. You can install a application called JSON Web Token 𝐾𝐤. So you type npm install -g JSON Web Token 𝐾𝐤, and then you'll be able to use a command that is JWT. And when you type -d space a token like this is a WT token, right? JWT, sorry. And then you type JWT-d space the token. Oh, I'm sorry. After type this command and press and hit return, you have this. You basically see what is the internal structure of this token here. So this is the token, and this is the internal structure. Look at this. The developer created this internal structure, and he or she typed, and he or she defined that internally in this token, we will have a JSON object where we have a sub that basically is the email that represents the user, the role, that's the role admin, the date when it was created, and the expiration date, that is basically where we will expire this token. And look at this. Maybe this user here was supposed to be the user, not the admin. But when I test this, I look at the internal structure of the JSON token, I can see that the role is admin, but it was supposed to be the user. So I can just raise my hand and talk to the developers on my team and discuss why this role is incorrect. Another thing that I can test is that, is this the create date, the proper create date? Is this the expiration date expected? Do you see? So you can test these kind of things if you look internally in the token. If you don't do this way, probably you will need to do a lot of other tests, exercising the API in order to discover this. But if you look inside the token, it will be so much easier to do it. So it's pretty quick and simple, and you will not compromise the token that you created for your company by using websites that are not allowed by your corporation, right? So this is the first one. So another approach that you can use is to checking logs. So this is very useful, guys, very useful. What I do basically is, when I am testing the API, I'm not only sending requests, I'm also looking at the logs and evaluating what is going on. So look at this. This is the log. These are the logs from my API, and then I went to Postman, and I am sending the request with my email and password. Okay, senha in Portuguese means password in English. So I will send the request to this auth endpoint, and then when I send this request, what is going to happen is that I will receive the response here. However, in the logs, I will see more information about this request. So when I look at this, I will see that in that date and time, I received a request, and look at the request. It comes with authentication, and I see the email and the password. However, for many companies, they should not show the password in the logs. So what we do here? What we do here is basically to report this as an issue, and then if I am able to go there in the code and do the change by myself, I can do it. In this case here, I went to the code, I saw what is going on. What is going on is as the wrong situation, and then I changed it by myself. but in some teams, it will be done by the developer, right? To fix this type of bug. However, as soon as I got the new version, then I can repeat my test. That is basically to send the request again. And then instead of to check the responses that I got on Postman, I will look at the log, and then you see that the password has disappeared. Okay? So this is something that is very, very, very important for everyone that tests APIs. That is basically to follow up the logs and then being able to go beyond the surface. Another thing that, another approach that you can use is called functional code review. I wrote a article for magazine in the United States called Enterprise Viewpoint. You can search by Júlio de Lima space Enterprise Viewpoint. You will find an article about functional code review that basically is to check the code that the developer has been developing. Okay, so we had a business rule that say, hey, arrival date should never be lower than the departure date. Okay, at this moment I ask you, how can you evaluate this? How can you validate if this is right? And probably you say, as soon as the endpoint is done, I can go there, send a request, and evaluate this rule using some test design techniques to identify what tests I should do, right? However, there is another way to do it that can help you to accelerate this process. That is, I can look at the pull request that the developer created. I can look at the files that were changed. And then I can see here in the pull request that the developer changed the method solvar, the method save. This method save now has a implementation of a logic here. You can see if get arrival date is greater than get departure date, throw an exception. This is wrong. Actually, is if the departure date is greater than the arrival date, throw an exception. But I, as a QA, were able to look at the pull request that the developer created, and then I identified this error before the API was deployed to the test environment. So if you are part of an agile team, you can do it. You can look at the PR, you can look at the branches, and you can anticipate things like that, right? So this is another approach. And then after identifying this issue, what I did was to create a comment saying, hey, developer, the requirement says that the arrival date should never be lower than the departure date. You implemented the inverse. Could you change the symbol greater than by lower than, please? And then after doing this, sending this comment to the developer, they can easily change this, right? So this is what people call shift left testing. I am testing I'm testing literally all the way left, right? Another approach that you can use to test APIs beyond the surface is to create mocks to simulate exception cases. So look at this. I have an API, and this API has an operation called get viagens or get travel, okay? So it's basically to get one specific travel. However, when I do this call, okay, the developer do a call to another API, an external API, that basically gets the temperature of the destination of the travel that I'm doing. So you can see here in this body that when I call get travels and pointing AID, what is going to happen is that I will have a temperature on the return. And this temperature came from another API. And maybe this API are not available, they are not working properly, or I would like to simulate some errors. Just connecting to the external API will not be able to test this kind of thing. So what I do, I basically replace the external API by an internal mock server. How I do it? I use a tool called Mountebank. This MB here is Mountebank. You can install Mountebank by typing npm install -g Mountebank. And then when I run Mountebank will start a server, basically a mock server on the port 2525. And then I can basically create imposters. One imposter is basically a mock that I create to simulate a service. And then I can say, hey, when someone call this API, what I want is to, instead of get a 200 status code, I would like to have a 500. You know, this is where we see the simulation for exception cases for integration. As soon as you have a mock, you can simulate whatever you want. I can simulate a 400, a 500, a 422, and etc. And then I can test how my API behaves based on it. So as soon as I started to return a 500, the API started to replicate this response by saying 500 as well. But the question is that expected? Once we have a 500 for an external API, is 500 that we want to respond to our clients, you know? So this is an approach that you can use as well. You can also use AI to do test design. And then I did an experiment on ChatGPT saying, hey, ChatGPT, I have a requirement. So apply equivalence partitioning and give me one test case per partition. Okay. So ChatGPT has created the partitions, and I, as a experienced tester, full of the knowledge of how the test design technique is applied, were able to identify that the equivalence partitioning was applied perfectly by ChatGPT in this situation. And I say in this situation because depending on what is the type of the prompt that you do, probably ChatGPT will not be able to apply this kind of technique, right? So you need to know deeply how to apply the technique in order to use this. And then I said, hey, now create some JSON objects. And then ChatGPT created the JSON objects. And then I said, now create test cases in Python using the library unit test. That is a library to do unit test in Python. And then I said, send the requests to an endpoint called post product, and then validate the message if the message is correct. And look at this, ChatGPT created the test cases using the libraries that I asked for. Okay, so this is something that we can use and can accelerate the way to create REST API tests. But again, it should be used only if you have if you have grant access to use ChatGPT on your corporation, and also you can use it if you know what ChatGPT is answering to you. You know, if you don't know it, it's not a good approach. REST API test coverage. So there is a library from 𝐕𝐞𝐿ovsky that is called Swagger Coverage. It's a library to help you to do REST API test coverage. Basically, you need to add a dependency, and after that, using REST Assure, okay, as a library for test automation, you can create your test case normally. However, under the given command, you have a filters method, as you see here, filters. And then inside these filters, you add the Swagger coverage rest assured. That basically is the same dependency that you add here, right? And then after that, you run the test. And when you run the test, look at this. I run the test, and a file was created here under a folder called Swagger coverage output. Once you do it, this file will create a Swagger file. Then you'll be able to run a command that is from Swagger coverage as well. You use a binary that you can download under the project Swagger coverage. Swagger coverage is open source. Space -s, pointing the Swagger that you use as reference. And then you can point it out, the Swagger coverage output. That's basically the folder that I have here. And then the Swagger coverage app will create to you a report in HTML, as you can see here, a report in JSON and a report in HTML. And this is what you are going to have as the result, as the output. Look at this. This is a full and very insightful and powerful report to measure the coverage. The coverage here is calculated based on a research from Martin Lopez et al. That basically talk about how to calculate the test coverage for REST APIs. That's very great as well. So JSON schema validation. If you want to validate the schema on the response of your JSON, and if you do it manually, it will take a lot of time and can be imprecise, right? But if you have the Swagger and the Swagger is well written, you can have the example of the response, right? You can copy this example of the response and use a website called JSONschema.net. JSONschema.net allows you to paste the format at the left. Okay, it's a free tool, by the way. To paste the model at the left, and then it will create a JSON schema validation on the right. So you can copy this schema. You see, there's a lot of rules here. You can copy this schema, and then on Postman, you can use this snippet here, use a tiny validator for JSON data. And then you can replace the schema that comes as default, pasting your schema that you brought from JSONschema.net. And then you can do some cleaning on this snippet in order to make the validation to be against the body of your response. So I do pm.response.json against the schema. So what happened here is that when I run the tests, the schema pass, right? The test pass because the schema is proper. But if I change, let's imagine that my Swagger said that it's not token, it's tokens now. When I copy the schema and I run again and I change my test on Postman, when I run again, it will fail because now I am expecting the structure to be tokens in plural, but it's token in singular, so it fails. So this is a way to do JSON schema validation. And the last approach that I brought to you today is contract tests. So JSON schema validation and contract tests are different approaches. Because when you are doing contract tests, you are validating both the connection between the consumer and the provider regarding to the consumer. Basically, what happens on contract tests is that a contract is created based on the communication between the consumer and the provider. So if anything changes on the provider or on the consumer side, the contract will be not valid, right? And then it will it will end up in a failure. You can do contract tests using many tools. However, Text.io is a tool that is well known in this field. Okay, Julio, today you showed me many approaches that I can use to test REST APIs. But how can I do it now? What should I do now? Well, you can first identify which of these strategies can be applied to your context, because it's a lot of information. Identify which one matches to your company, then apply that strategy and measure the positive impact. Okay, and then based on this feedback, you can learn and improve based on the results that you got. So this is a good path to you to start. Select some few of the approaches that you saw today, and then you'll be fine. Okay. And then last but not least, obrigado. Obrigado in Portuguese means thank you. Was a pleasure to talk to you today, guys. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Let's see here. I see a question from Mr. 𝐀𝐤𝐿. Mr. 𝐀𝐤𝐿 says, what are the key challenges in... Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks you so much for that, Julio. You just having a look at technical difficulties. You don't see me yet. There you go. Finally. Yes, thanks to that. It was very interesting, and I could tell you one time it was even interesting for me, somebody who does this on a daily basis. And one of the questions, I see we have a few questions here that is looking. So first, I would throw this one out, and the thing is about. There you go. There we go. What is the best approach method to perform API testing? And I know you talk about it, but I just wanted, because a question asked there, I just wanted the audience to understand what the approaches are.
Okay, so when we say best approach, it's so generic. I mean, the best approach will depend on the way that the development team are developing the APIs, the way that your team is delivering APIs, the way that you guys are evolving the product that you have. I would say that the approach should be based on the context, right? For example, we saw here today 8 approaches at least on how to apply REST API testing, right? So if you look at your project and you see, hey, I see here that we have an API that is connected to other 3 services. These are external services, and they are not able to give me a scenario where they are failing, where they are out, where they are off. So I watched that talk from Julio, and Julio said that we can use a mock, and using a mock I can simulate that errors coming from the external services. So this is the best approach, is to rely on what is the context and how you can overcome the barriers that the context are putting against you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that. And like people say, it's all about the context, to be honest, especially when coming to APIs. And yeah, sometimes I'll just roll into the other question. Instead of reading it out, I'll flash it onto the screen here. And it's, what are the key challenges in testing REST APIs beyond basic functionality?
The key challenge that I see is to have access to the source code. This is the key challenge for many of us, because when you have access to the source code, you can evolve, you can go deeply on the under the surface, as I said, because you will be able to evaluate the controller, you'll be able to look at the logs, you'll be able to look at the code, you'll be able to look at how the tokens are created. If you have this access, you'll be good to go and under the surface. My tip to you guys is talk to the developer that is more your friend, and talk to this guy, be close to them and say, hey, let me take a look on the code, on how you develop, and then you can start to provide some insights. This could be a good starting to you to get access to the code and to be able to evolve on software testing on REST APIs.
All right, and I'll throw in another question here, which is, I think this one is real synonymous with what goes on in the world today, really. What strategies do you recommend for handling asynchronous API operations and testing?
So there is definitively a thing that I used to call independent approach, right? I mean, there are two moments when we are talking about synchronous APIs, right? One is when you start the process. The second one is when you get the response. And they may take 1 day, 2 days, 3 days based on the amount of things that are doing during this asynchronous process. So one thing is to evaluate that you send the request and the request has worked good, okay? Another one is to send it to receive the request and then look that this was good enough as well, or to see if something was changed in the server to validate that test passed. So be prepared for this. You will not send a request and put a timeout to wait until the response are good. You test one thing and another thing separately. Okay, that's why I call this independent approach.
Oh, that's good. And and I know we how the time is going, so I have to I want to ask. I see a lot of questions coming in, and some of them are really, really good. And so just I think we'll throw this one in there. Please, they want to know. I think I'll just show it to you. It says, please suggest the best practice for data-driven API testing.
Okay, so first of all, when you create a test automation framework, the first thing that we do is to try to create the minimalist test framework, right? So we start to create bodies that are hard-coded on the script. Don't do that, because it will hurt your data-driven approach. When you are creating tests to the APIs, you need to take approaches that are a modern approach, like, for example, data binding. So you have, for each test, you have one JSON file that represents the request and one JSON file that represents the response. So if you want to do a data-driven, what you will do basically is to input the JSON file that you want to send and the JSON file for the response that you expect to receive. So my point here is try to not try, but do not put the bodies or the JSON file, the JSON objects inside the script, but outside, and try to use the object, the files itself as your data-driven approach. So this is a way that can at least save some effort from you in the future. Okay, and I know we have low amount of time here because I try to give a lot of content.
So what we're gonna do is, what we're gonna do is put
but please reach out to me afterwards. I will be more than happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is just put this here. I mean, you meant everybody know about you and everything. And one of the things we're wondering is, it has nothing to do with the whole API thing. But I mean, it does. But I think we should answer this. Give us these some of the audiences. Do you have your API courses in English? And if so, could you please provide links to it? Yes.
Sorry, guys. I have this in my plan. You know, I have a course, a training course in Portuguese that has 21 classes, 21 classes, and we have also a certified at the end. This is very deep on REST API testing, but I need to translate it. But I promise you, it will come by the end of 2023. Okay.
All right, I know. I mean, that before we all wrap it up, you know, with time constraints and everything, and I think we went over a little bit, but giving us it because it's so cool. You know, I want to thank you for sharing your insights into the advanced, you know, whole REST API testing strategy. And furthermore, I want to thank the audience, especially, you know, I want to give the audience that thing, that for the incredible, you know, the whole natural learning experience and the questions that they put forward to us. And you know, and let me just mention one time, this entire session it is being recorded, and you would be able to see it on the Lambda Test YouTube channel. But before you go, do you have any parting words for these good people of us that give us the, you know, the time and energy to listen to us? Parting words.
Yeah. So guys, look at my eyes, okay? So you are great. You are great. You need to remember that we are more than just people that are clicking around, okay? You are not just clicking around. You are bringing insightful things to the team that you work for. So in order to do it and to show this value to the company and be more valuable to the company and to the team, and, you know, show up whatever you have inside of you, you need to go deep. And go deep is to just understand more the architecture and be more close to the developers and show them everything that you have to deliver, okay? You're great, guys. So go deep, and this will help you to grow up a lot. Thank you.
All right, you know, and those are the awesome words from Julio there, and I want to thank everybody. So happy testing, you know, and have a great rest of the day ahead into the conference. And last but not least, let's thank Lambda Test for the whole TestMu 2023 conference. You know, thank you everybody, and Julio, it was really a pleasure, and I must say, well done.
Me too, my friend. Thank you, Larry. It was a pleasure to be with you, and thank you, Lambda Test, for everything. It was amazing.